There comes a moment on the inner path when you begin to notice how much of your life has been spent explaining, justifying, correcting, defending your intentions, defending your choices, defending your past, defending your worth. And if you are honest with yourself, you may realize that this habit has been so deeply woven into your identity that you no longer question it, you simply react. Someone doubts you, and your chest tightens. Someone misunderstands you, and your mind races. Someone judges you, and suddenly you feel compelled to prove something not to them, but to the invisible jury you have been carrying inside your own consciousness. And yet, the soul has never asked you to defend yourself. The soul does not argue. The soul does not explain. The soul simply is. To stop defending yourself is not an act of weakness. It is one of the most powerful spiritual decisions you can make. Because the need to defend always arises from the same illusion. The belief that who you are can be diminished by someone else's perception. The ego lives inside that illusion. It survives by comparison, by approval, by validation. It believes that worth must be negotiated, earned, protected, or explained. The soul knows something very different. The soul knows that worth is intrinsic, not conditional. It is not given, and it cannot be taken away. When you stop defending yourself, you are not giving up your power. You are reclaiming it from a world that never had the authority to define you in the first place. Think about how often arguments arise, not because truth is at stake, but because identity feels threatened. Someone challenges your view, and suddenly it feels like they are challenging you. Someone disagrees with your choice, and it feels like an attack on your intelligence, your morality, your value. But the awakened mind begins to see that disagreement is not danger. Judgment is not a verdict. Misunderstanding is not a condemnation. These are merely experiences passing through awareness. When you no longer fuse your sense of self with opinions, roles, or outcomes, you become free to observe without reacting, to listen without collapsing, to remain centered even when the world is noisy. There is a quiet dignity that emerges when you stop defending yourself. It is not arrogance. It is not indifference. It is an inner steadiness that says, I do not need to convince you of who I am because I am no longer trying to convince myself. That steadiness is the signature of higher consciousness. It comes from knowing that your essence was complete before anyone formed an opinion about you, and it will remain complete long after those opinions have dissolved into silence. When you no longer argue with reality, reality begins to cooperate with you in ways that feel almost miraculous. The universe does not respond to explanations, it responds to alignment. You can spend your life defending your actions, or you can spend it embodying your truth. One is exhausting, the other is effortless. When you live from alignment, your presence speaks louder than any justification ever could. You do not need to announce who you are. You demonstrate it through the energy you carry, the compassion you extend, the peace you refuse to surrender. This is why the wisest people often say the least. They have learned that silence, when it comes from awareness, is not emptiness, it is authority. Defensiveness is rooted in fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of being rejected, fear of being unseen or unworthy. But fear dissolves in the presence of awareness. The moment you notice yourself preparing to defend, pause, breathe. Ask yourself gently, what am I afraid will happen if I don't? You may discover that what you are protecting is not your truth, but an image, not your soul, but a story. And stories, no matter how convincing, are not who you are. They are costumes consciousness wears for a while, then sets aside. To stop defending yourself is to trust that life is intelligent. It is to trust that you do not need to control how you are perceived in order to fulfill your purpose. The river does not defend its direction, it flows. The sun does not defend its brightness, it shines. The tree does not defend its growth, it grows. And you were not designed to spend your life explaining your existence. You were designed to express it. When you align with that truth, you move out of resistance and into grace. This does not mean you never speak. It means you speak from clarity, not compulsion. It means your words arise from intention, not insecurity. There is a vast difference between responding and reacting. Reaction is automatic, ego-driven, and fueled by the need to protect an identity. Response is conscious, spacious, and guided by awareness. When you stop defending yourself, you gain access to that space. You begin to choose peace over proving, understanding over winning, presence over performance. Notice how often the ego wants the last word. It believes that closure comes from being right, but the soul knows that closure comes from letting go. There are no justified resentments in higher consciousness, because resentment requires a story of injury, and higher consciousness sees only lessons, growth, and unfolding intelligence. When you release the need to defend, you also release the need to blame. And in that release, forgiveness becomes natural, not as a moral obligation, but as a logical consequence of understanding that nothing real has ever been threatened. The practice of not defending yourself is a form of meditation in daily life. Each interaction becomes an invitation to remain present. Each criticism becomes an opportunity to observe without attaching. Each misunderstanding becomes a reminder that your worth does not fluctuate with circumstances. This is how inner freedom is cultivated, not in isolation, but in relationship. Not by avoiding the world, but by meeting it without armor. There is a profound relief that comes when you realize you no longer have to manage your image. You no longer have to curate how you are seen. You no longer have to correct every misconception. The mind relaxes. The body softens. Energy that was once spent on self-protection becomes available for creativity, love, service, and joy. This is not a small shift. It is a radical reorientation of consciousness from self-consciousness to soul consciousness. When you live this way, something extraordinary happens. People may still judge you, but their judgments no longer hook you. They may still misunderstand you, but their misunderstandings no longer define you. And paradoxically, the less you defend yourself, the more trustworthy you appear. The less you explain, the more grounded you feel. The less you argue, the more powerful your presence becomes. This is because power does not come from persuasion. It comes from coherence, from living in harmony with who you truly are. The higher state of consciousness you step into when you stop defending yourself is not aloof or detached. It is deeply compassionate. You begin to see that others defend themselves for the same reason you once did: fear, conditioning, pain, confusion. And instead of meeting defensiveness with defensiveness, you meet it with understanding. You no longer need to win because you are no longer playing the game of validation. You are playing the game of awakening. Remember this: you are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to be aligned with truth. You are not here to convince the world of your value. You are here to remember it. And when you remember, you naturally radiate a quiet confidence that does not need applause. You trust the universe not because everything goes your way, but because you know that whatever comes your way cannot diminish what you are. So the next time you feel the urge to defend yourself, see it as a gentle signal, not a command, but a reminder to return to awareness, a reminder to breathe, a reminder to choose presence over performance. Let the moment pass without resistance. Let the silence speak. Let your life, not your explanations, be the evidence of who you are. This is the freedom Wayne Dyer spoke of, the freedom that comes when you stop asking the world for permission to be yourself. When you stop defending, you stop fighting shadows. You step into alignment with a higher intelligence that has always been guiding you. And in that alignment, you discover a truth so simple and so profound that it requires no defense at all. You are already enough. You have always been enough. And nothing outside of you has ever held the authority to say otherwise. And as you remain in this space of non-defense, something subtle yet extraordinary begins to occur within you. You start to feel the difference between reacting from memory and responding from presence. Memory is heavy. It carries the weight of every past wound, every conditioned belief about how you should be seen, every learned reflex that once promised safety but now only tightens the knot inside your chest. Presence, on the other hand, is light. It has no history to protect and no future to secure. It simply allows life to move through you without obstruction. In this allowing, you discover that peace is not something you create, it is something you stop interfering with. The mind may protest at first. It may whisper that silence is surrender, that not explaining is agreement, that not correcting is failure. But these whispers are echoes of an old training, a world that taught you to equate worth with noise and strength with resistance. The deeper intelligence within you knows otherwise. It knows that true strength is spacious, not rigid. It knows that confidence does not announce itself, it radiates. When you no longer rush to clarify, justify, or persuade, you give yourself the gift of inner stillness. And from that stillness, clarity emerges on its own, unforced and precise. In this state, you begin to recognize how often defending yourself has been a way of defending the past. Old decisions, old identities, old versions of yourself that were necessary at the time but no longer reflect who you are becoming. When you stop defending, you allow yourself to evolve without apology. You stop dragging yesterday into today. You let each moment stand on its own, fresh and unburdened. This is living in the now, not as a concept, but as a felt experience where the heart is no longer braced for impact. There is also a deep humility that unfolds here, a humility that is not self-diminishing but self-liberating. You realize that you do not need to be right to be whole. You do not need to be admired to be at peace. You do not need to be agreed with to be aligned. Humility, in its highest form, is the willingness to let life be larger than your personal narrative. It is the quiet acceptance that every person you encounter is seeing the world through a lens shaped by their own history, fears, and hopes, and that none of those lenses have the power to alter your essence. As this understanding deepens, forgiveness ceases to be an effort and becomes a natural movement of consciousness. You forgive not because others deserve it, but because you no longer wish to carry what does not belong to you. You see that holding on to the need to defend keeps you tethered to the very energies you long to be free from. Releasing that need is an act of self-respect. It is saying gently and firmly, I choose peace over proving. And in that choice, the body relaxes, the breath deepens, and the nervous system finally receives the message that it is safe to rest. From here, life begins to meet you differently. Conversations soften, conflicts lose their charge. Even when disagreement arises, it no longer feels personal. It feels informational. You listen more deeply because you are no longer listening for threats. You speak more clearly because your words are no longer filtered through fear. And when silence comes, it feels rich rather than awkward, full rather than empty. Silence becomes a companion, a reminder that truth does not require volume. You may notice that the universe mirrors this inner shift in unexpected ways. Opportunities appear without struggle. Support arrives without solicitation. Guidance becomes more intuitive, less analytical. This is not coincidence, it is resonance. When you stop broadcasting defensiveness, you stop attracting situations that require it. You begin to live in harmony with a higher order one that does not test you through opposition, but teaches you through alignment. At this level of awareness, you understand that your life is not a courtroom where you must continually present evidence of your goodness, intelligence, or worth. It is a classroom, a sanctuary, a field of experience designed to awaken you to who you are beyond roles and labels. And the lesson is always the same, though it arrives in countless forms. Nothing real needs to be defended. Truth stands on its own. Love explains itself. Being requires no justification. So you walk forward now with a lighter step, not because the world has changed, but because you have. You trust the intelligence that breathes you, guides you, and unfolds your path with quiet precision. You let go of the impulse to manage how you are received, and in doing so, you finally receive yourself. This is the higher state of consciousness you step into, not elevated above others, but rooted more deeply in what is timeless, compassionate, and free. And in this freedom, you discover the simplest, most transformative realization of all. When you no longer defend yourself, you are no longer at war with life. You are in dialogue with it. You listen, you respond, you grow. You live not as an argument to be proven, but as a presence to be felt. And that presence, calm, awake, and quietly powerful, becomes your greatest contribution to the world. And as this presence stabilizes within you, you begin to sense a deeper reorientation taking place. Not dramatic, not announced, but unmistakable. It is as though the center of gravity within your being has shifted from the outer world to the inner landscape, where once you scanned faces for approval, tones for validation, outcomes for reassurance, you now rest in a quieter knowing. You are no longer negotiating your existence moment by moment. You are inhabiting it. This is the subtle liberation that comes when identity loosens its grip and awareness takes the lead. You may notice how time itself feels different here. Urgency fades. The need to rush toward resolution dissolves. When you stop defending yourself, you step out of the illusion that something essential is always at risk. You begin to understand that life is not an exam you can fail, nor a performance you must perfect. It is a process of remembering again and again that you are participating in something far more intelligent than the thinking mind. This remembrance softens the edges of experience. Even uncertainty becomes less threatening when you trust that you are held by a larger order. In this space, you also start to recognize how much energy has been reclaimed. Energy that was once bound up in rehearsing conversations, anticipating criticism, replaying misunderstandings. That energy returns to you now as vitality, creativity, and quiet joy. You feel more available not just to others, but to yourself. You listen inwardly with the same compassion you once reserved for defending outwardly. And in that listening, you hear guidance that does not shout, does not argue, does not insist, it simply invites. The ego may still appear from time to time, as it always does. Old reflexes may surface, the impulse to explain may rise, but now there is space around it. You do not shame it or suppress it. You observe it with kindness, understanding that it once served a purpose, and because you no longer identify with it, it loses its authority. Awareness watches. Choice returns. This is not perfection. This is mastery, gentle, patient, and profoundly human. As you continue living from this place, relationships transform, some deepen, some dissolve, some rearrange themselves in ways that feel both surprising and inevitable. You no longer cling to being understood. You value resonance over agreement. You discover that true connection does not come from convincing another of your truth, but from meeting them as they are, without armor, without agenda. And when connection is not possible, you release it without bitterness, trusting that alignment is always kinder than attachment. There is also a growing intimacy with life itself. Ordinary moments become luminous. A breath, a pause, a simple exchange carries a quiet richness that once went unnoticed. This is because you are no longer split, part of you present, part of you defending. You are whole in the moment. And wholeness has a way of revealing beauty where the fragmented mind once saw only problems to solve. Gradually, you realize that the practice of not defending yourself has become a way of being. It is no longer something you remember to do. It is something you naturally embody. You move through the world with an ease that does not depend on circumstances. Challenges still arise, but they do not destabilize you. Praise may come, but it does not inflate you. Criticism may appear, but it does not define you. You remain centered, not because you are unaffected, but because you are anchored in something deeper than reaction. And from this anchoring, trust blossoms not blind optimism, but a steady confidence in the unfolding intelligence of life. You trust that what needs to be said will be said. What needs to be clarified will clarify itself. What needs to fall away will do so without force. You trust that your path does not require constant defense because it is guided by a wisdom that does not make mistakes, even when it uses experiences you once labeled as wrong. So you continue gently and deliberately, choosing awareness over argument, presence over protection, truth over tension. You let your life speak in the language of alignment. And as you do, you discover that the quiet confidence you now carry is not something you created, it is something you allowed. It was always there, waiting beneath the noise, waiting for you to stop defending, stop proving, stop bracing, and simply be. And with this balance restored, you begin to sense that life is no longer pushing against you, nor are you pushing against it. There is a rhythm now, subtle, intelligent, trustworthy. You move with it rather than against it. Decisions arise with less struggle. You no longer need to force certainty before taking a step, because you have learned that clarity often follows movement, not the other way around. When you are not defending yourself, you are not frozen in self-doubt. You are responsive, fluid, alive. There is a new relationship with uncertainty that develops here. What once felt like danger now feels like openness. You understand that uncertainty is not the absence of guidance, but the presence of possibility. The mind prefers fixed answers because it seeks control, but the soul thrives in openness because it trusts direction. When you stop defending, you stop clinging to rigid positions. You allow yourself to be taught by experience rather than threatened by it. Life becomes a dialogue instead of a debate. This balance also reveals itself in how you relate to success and failure. Neither one defines you anymore. Achievement no longer inflates your sense of self, and setbacks no longer diminish it. You see both as movements within a larger unfolding waves on the surface of something much deeper and more stable. This stability does not come from certainty about outcomes. It comes from certainty about being. You know who you are beyond roles, beyond results, beyond recognition, and that knowing cannot be shaken. As this understanding matures, compassion expands naturally. You see how many people are still exhausting themselves, trying to be seen, trying to be right, trying to be safe through defense. You recognize the tension in their words, the urgency in their reactions, the fear beneath their arguments, and instead of meeting that fear with resistance, you meet it with presence. You listen without needing to fix. You speak without needing to dominate. Sometimes you say nothing at all, allowing your calm to do the work that words cannot. There is a quiet courage required to live this way. It takes courage to remain open in a world that rewards defensiveness. It takes courage to be still when others are reactive, to be grounded when others are restless, to be silent when others demand explanation. But this courage is not effortful. It does not come from willpower. It comes from alignment, from standing in a truth that does not need reinforcement. Once you taste this kind of courage, you recognize it as strength without aggression, confidence without comparison. Gradually, the need to manage how you are perceived fades into the background of your awareness. You are no longer preoccupied with the story others are telling about you. You are engaged with the life you are actually living. Attention returns to the present moment, where power has always resided. You realize that defending yourself was never about protection, it was about distraction. And now that the distraction has fallen away, what remains is a direct, intimate connection with life itself. This is where balance reveals its deeper meaning. Not neutrality, not detachment, but integration. Mind and heart working together, action informed by awareness, stillness alive with movement. You do not retreat from the world, nor do you lose yourself in it. You participate fully without losing your center. You care deeply without clinging. You engage honestly without armoring. This is the equilibrium of awakened living. And in this equilibrium, something settles permanently within you. A quiet trust. Not that everything will go as planned, but that whatever unfolds will contribute to your awakening. You trust that you do not need to defend your path because it is uniquely yours. You trust that life knows what it is doing, even when the mind does not. You trust yourself, not the constructed self that seeks approval, but the deeper self that observes, learns, and grows through every experience. So you continue forward, not striving, not proving, not resisting. You move with a steady openness, allowing life to reveal itself step by step. You are no longer defined by reaction, nor driven by fear. You are guided by awareness, grounded in being, and balanced between heaven and earth, fully human, deeply conscious, and quietly free. And now, as this understanding settles into the deepest chambers of your being, you may notice a stillness that feels unfamiliar yet profoundly intimate. It is the stillness that comes when nothing inside you is arguing with the moment. You are not rehearsing explanations. You are not anticipating defense. You are not bracing for impact. You are simply here. And in this here-ness, you realize that peace was never something missing from your life. It was something waiting for you to stop interrupting it. You begin to sense that life has always been inviting you into this simplicity. Not a simplicity of circumstances, but a simplicity of relationship with yourself. When you no longer stand guard over an identity, you discover that awareness itself is enough. It holds joy without grasping, sorrow without drowning, love without fear. You no longer need to armor your heart, because you are no longer mistaking vulnerability for danger. Openness becomes natural when you trust the intelligence that lives beneath every breath. There is a gentleness now in how you move through the world. You listen with your whole being. You speak with care, not calculation. You allow others their opinions without absorbing them as truth. You have learned that you do not need to resist what is false when you are anchored in what is real. Truth does not compete. It does not shout. It does not defend itself. It simply remains steady, luminous, undeniable. And in this remaining, you touch something timeless within yourself, a presence that existed before you learned to explain yourself, before you learned to perform, before you learned to protect. This presence has watched every chapter of your life unfold with infinite patience. It has never doubted your worth. It has never questioned your belonging. It has always known that you were enough, not because of what you do, but because of what you are. From this place, gratitude arises effortlessly. Not gratitude for perfection, but gratitude for participation, for being alive in a universe that is constantly offering you opportunities to remember who you are. Even the moments that once felt adversarial now reveal their hidden gift. They taught you the cost of self-defense and the freedom of self-trust. They guided you gently and persistently back to yourself. You may still encounter noise. The world will not suddenly become quiet, but you have changed how you meet it. You no longer take its turbulence personally. You no longer confuse its opinions with your essence. You stand rooted while life moves around you, like a tree that does not argue with the wind. You sway when needed. You remain when needed. You trust your roots. And so you live now with a quiet confidence that needs no audience. You act from purpose rather than pressure. You allow life to unfold without constant commentary. You know when to speak, when to listen, and when to let silence carry the wisdom that words cannot. This is not withdrawal from life. This is intimacy with it. As you continue on your path, remember this gentle truth. The universe does not require your defense. Your soul does not require your explanation. You are not here to prove your value. You are here to express it. When you stop defending yourself, you stop fragmenting your energy. You gather yourself back into wholeness. And in that wholeness, you become a quiet blessing to yourself, to others, and to the unfolding world. Let this be the way you walk forward now. Not guarded, not hardened, not reactive, but awake. Awake to the intelligence that guides you. Awake to the peace that lives beneath every moment. Awake to the simple, liberating realization that nothing real about you has ever been in danger. And in this awakening, you find the deepest freedom of all, the freedom to be without defense, exactly as you are. You're seeing this because something within you already knows that the season you are standing in is not an accident, that there is an intelligence moving through your life that has never abandoned you, never lost sight of you, never confused your detours with your destiny. There is a quiet recognition happening right now, a gentle stirring in the soul that says, it's time. Not time to force, not time to prove, not time to chase what runs away from you, but time to remember who you are, beneath all the noise, all the labels, all the old stories you've been carrying like unnecessary luggage. The universe doesn't shout when it's ready to deliver, it whispers. And those whispers often come in moments like this, when you finally slow down long enough to hear the truth you've always known. Winning, as you've been taught to define it, has been wrapped in struggle, comparison, and exhaustion. You were told that to win, you must outrun someone else, outshine someone else, or outlast someone else. But there is a deeper intelligence at work here, one that understands that life is not a competition, it is a conversation. And the quality of that conversation is determined by the way you speak to yourself when no one else is listening. When you change how you see yourself, life responds, not because life is judging you, but because life is mirroring you. It is always saying yes to the deepest belief you hold about who you are. There comes a moment in every awakening soul's journey when chasing becomes unbearable. You feel it in your body, first a tightness, a fatigue, a subtle grief that says this isn't how it's meant to be. You realize that the harder you run, the further fulfillment seems to move away. And this is not failure, this is intelligence. This is the soul tapping you on the shoulder, gently but firmly, saying, stop running from yourself. Alignment begins the moment you stop seeking permission to be who you already are. It begins when you release the belief that something outside of you must change before you can feel whole inside. You were not born to earn your worth. You were born worthy. Long before you had a name, a role, a job, or a history, you existed as pure being. You didn't have to achieve anything to deserve breath, light, or love. That worth has never left you. It has simply been covered by layers of conditioning, expectations, and fear. Winning, in its truest sense, is the process of uncovering what was never lost. It is remembering that you are not a fragment trying to become complete. You are completeness learning how to express itself through a human life. The ego will argue with this. It will say, yes, but, and then list all the reasons you should wait, improve, fix, or prove. The ego thrives on postponement. It survives by convincing you that your life will begin someday after you meet a certain condition. But the soul knows no such delay. The soul lives only in now. because now is the only place where life actually happens. When you anchor yourself in the present moment, you step out of fear and into power. Fear lives in imagined futures and unresolved pasts. Power lives here. Notice how often your mind pulls you backward, replaying moments of regret, embarrassment, or pain. Notice how easily it convinces you that those moments define you. They don't. They refined you. They taught you. They shaped your compassion, your depth, your awareness. You were never meant to drag them forward like evidence against yourself. Letting go of the past does not mean denying it. It means honoring it without living inside it. The past is a classroom, not a prison. Once the lesson is learned, the door opens naturally. Forgiveness is not something you do for others. It is something you do to free your own energy. Holding resentment is like gripping a hot coal with the intention of throwing it someday. You are the one who gets burned. There are no justified resentments, because resentment always poisons the vessel that contains it. When you forgive, you are not saying what happened was acceptable. You are saying your peace is no longer negotiable. And in that decision, something extraordinary happens. Your life force returns to you. Healing begins within, not because the world is irrelevant, but because perception is primary. Two people can walk through the same experience and emerge with entirely different realities based on the meaning they assign to what happened. When you heal your perception, you heal your experience. This is why changing how you see yourself changes everything. Life responds to your self-concept with perfect consistency. When you see yourself as lacking, life presents you with proof. When you see yourself as whole, life rearranges itself to confirm that truth. You may notice that when you stop chasing, doors open naturally. Opportunities arrive without strain. Conversations flow. Ideas feel alive. This is alignment. Alignment is not passive, it is receptive. It is the state of allowing rather than forcing. Forcing comes from the belief that life is withholding from you. Allowing comes from the knowing that life is collaborating with you. The river does not struggle to reach the ocean. It trusts gravity. It trusts its own movement. And in that trust, it arrives. You are a divine being having a human experience, not the other way around. Your essence is not limited by time, circumstance, or opinion. It is infinite, creative, and intelligent. When you identify only with your body, your past, or your achievements, you shrink yourself into something you are not. When you remember your spiritual identity, you expand into a presence that cannot be threatened. The world may still challenge you, but it no longer defines you. There is a profound freedom that comes when you stop needing external validation to confirm your worth. Praise becomes pleasant rather than necessary. Criticism becomes information rather than injury. You begin to move through life with a quiet confidence that doesn't announce itself. This is the confidence of alignment. It is not loud, it is not arrogant, it is grounded in knowing rather than proving. And paradoxically, this is when life begins to celebrate you, because you are no longer asking it to. Change your thoughts, and you change your life, not because positive thinking is magic, but because thought is the architect of experience. Every belief is a lens. Every lens shapes what you see. When you shift from I must become to I am, you step into a new relationship with reality. You stop negotiating with fear. You stop postponing joy. You stop waiting for permission to live fully. And life, sensing your readiness, responds. Winning is not about defeating others. It has never been about that. True winning is becoming the version of yourself that no longer doubts their worth, that no longer abandons themselves for approval, that no longer lives in quiet apology for existing. It is the moment you decide to stand in your truth without shrinking or hardening. It is the moment you choose love over fear, presence over distraction, authenticity over performance. You may still have goals, dreams, and ambitions, and that is beautiful, but now they arise from fullness rather than lack. You are no longer trying to prove that you matter. You are expressing that you do. And expression feels entirely different from effort. Expression is joyful, it is creative, it is sustainable. Effort exhausts, expression energizes. When you operate from alignment, even challenges carry a sense of meaning because you trust the intelligence guiding you. Listen closely now, not with your ears, but with your awareness. The soul always knows. It knows when something is out of alignment. It knows when it is time to release, to rest, to begin again. You have felt this knowing your entire life, often dismissed it, often overridden it with logic or fear, but it has never left you. It is patient, and it is speaking to you now, reminding you that this moment is not random. It is an invitation. You are seeing this because it's finally your turn, not because you are better than anyone else, but because you are ready to stop arguing with your own worth, ready to stop delaying your joy, ready to step into a life that reflects the truth of who you are rather than the fear of who you thought you had to be. This readiness is not dramatic. It is quiet. It feels like relief. It feels like exhaling after holding your breath for far too long. Allow yourself to trust this turning point. Trust that alignment will guide you more accurately than force ever could. Trust that when you honor yourself, life honors you back. Trust that you are not late, broken, or behind. You are exactly where awakening brings you when it is time to remember. And from this place, winning is no longer something you chase, it is something you embody. And as you settle into this awareness, something subtle yet profound begins to happen inside you. The urgency softens. The inner noise quiets. You realize that peace was never waiting at the finish line. It has always been available in the way you choose to be with yourself right now. This is the great turning point most people overlook, the moment you stop trying to extract meaning from life and instead allow meaning to arise through you. Life is not something you conquer. It is something you cooperate with. And cooperation begins with trust. Trust does not mean you understand every step ahead. It means you are willing to walk without demanding guarantees. The ego insists on certainty before movement. The soul moves first and reveals certainty afterward. This is why faith feels risky to the mind but natural to the heart. You were never designed to see the entire staircase, only the next step. And when you honor that step, it appears. When you resist it, confusion grows. Life responds not to forceful intention, but to sincere alignment. There is a sacred intelligence orchestrating connections, timing, and encounters in ways far beyond what logic can calculate. Think of how often the most meaningful moments in your life arrived unannounced, unplanned, disguised as inconvenience or delay. Those moments were not random interruptions, they were course corrections. The universe does not punish, it redirects. And redirection often feels uncomfortable only because the ego resists losing control. But control is not power, presence is. When you live from presence, you stop asking, how do I get there? And begin asking, who am I being while I'm here? This shift changes everything. You realize that becoming the best version of yourself is not about self-improvement, it is about self-remembrance. You are not here to add layers, you are here to release what obscures the light. Every false belief you let go of creates space for truth to breathe. Notice how much energy you once spent managing appearances, rehearsing conversations, defending positions, or replaying what should have been said. All of that effort was an attempt to protect an identity you thought you had to maintain. But the soul needs no defense. It is grounded in something unassailable. When you stop protecting the image, you discover the freedom of being real. And realness has a magnetic quality that performance never will. This is why life begins to feel lighter when you align with who you truly are. You laugh more easily, you listen more deeply, you respond rather than react. You are no longer trying to extract value from every interaction. You are simply present. And presence is healing not only for you, but for everyone who comes into contact with you. Your calm becomes a sanctuary. Your authenticity becomes permission. You may still experience moments of doubt. This is part of being human, but doubt no longer defines you. It passes through rather than settling in. You recognize it as a weather pattern, not the sky. And in this recognition, you reclaim choice. You choose thoughts that honor your dignity. You choose actions that reflect your truth. You choose patience over panic. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, your life reorganizes itself around these choices. There is no finish line to awakening. There is only deepening. Each layer of understanding invites a gentler relationship with yourself. You stop rushing your own growth. You stop measuring your life against someone else's timeline. You understand that a flower does not bloom faster by being compared to another. It blooms when conditions are right, and your conditions improve the moment you stop criticizing where you are. You are allowed to enjoy your life without earning it through suffering. You are allowed to feel joy without explaining it. You are allowed to succeed without guilt. These permissions do not come from the world, they come from within. When you grant them to yourself, the world reflects them back. This is not coincidence, it is coherence. Inner alignment creates outer harmony. And so you stand here now, not as someone waiting to win, but as someone who understands that winning is an inner state. It is the quiet confidence of knowing you belong here. It is the steady peace of trusting your path. It is the freedom of no longer postponing your worth. From this place, your actions are inspired rather than desperate. Your goals feel meaningful rather than heavy. Your life feels like an expression, not a struggle. Carry this knowing gently. Let it inform your choices without turning it into another standard to live up to. Awakening is not something you achieve, it is something you allow. And the more you allow, the more life meets you with grace. You are not becoming someone new. You are remembering who you have always been. And in that remembrance, you don't just move toward a better life, you realize you are already standing inside it. And from within this remembrance, a gentler strength begins to rise, one that does not push against the world, but moves with it. You start to notice how little effort it takes to be yourself when you stop resisting your own nature. Like water finding its way around stone, you learn that softness is not weakness, it is intelligence in motion. The rigid break, the flexible endure, and you were always meant to endure not by hardening, but by yielding to what is real. You begin to sense that much of what you once called discipline was actually fear in disguise, and much of what you called ambition was a longing to be seen. When those layers dissolve, what remains is clarity. You act not because you are driven, but because you are drawn. The difference is subtle yet profound. Driven energy exhausts, drawn energy renews. When your actions arise from alignment, even rest feels purposeful because you are no longer at war with yourself. There is a quiet joy in realizing you no longer need to rush life. Time softens its grip when you stop measuring your value against productivity. You become more interested in depth than speed, in meaning rather than momentum. And paradoxically, this is when things begin to move, not frantically, not chaotically, but with a sense of right timing that feels almost orchestrated. You arrive where you need to be, not by force, but by fit. Pay attention to how your body responds when you are aligned. There is ease in your breath, openness in your chest, a subtle relaxation behind the eyes. Your body is always honest. It does not reason, it resonates. When you listen to it, you access a guidance system far older than thought. This is wisdom that cannot be rushed or argued with. It simply is. And when you honor it, you honor life itself. You may notice that certain struggles quietly fall away, not because you solve them, but because they no longer require your attention. What you stop feeding stops growing. Energy follows awareness, and when your awareness rests in wholeness, fragmentation loses its grip. You do not need to fight the old patterns. You simply outgrow them. Like clothes that no longer fit, they fall away on their own. There is a sacred humility that emerges when you understand this. You stop taking credit for everything that goes right, and you stop blaming yourself for everything that goes wrong. You recognize that you are a participant in something vast, intelligent, and benevolent. You do your part, and then you let go. This letting go is not resignation. It is trust in action. It is knowing when to act and when to allow. As this trust deepens, you become less reactive to the world's noise. Opinions lose their sharpness. Expectations lose their weight. You begin to move from an inner reference point rather than an external one. And in doing so, you discover a surprising truth. The more anchored you are within, the more gracefully you navigate without. Stability becomes your gift to the world, not something you demand from it. You may still encounter moments that test you. This is the human curriculum, but now those moments feel instructive rather than punitive. You ask different questions. Not, why is this happening to me? But what is this inviting me to see? And in that question, you reclaim your creative power. You shift from victim to witness, from resistance to curiosity. And curiosity opens doors fear could never find. Gradually, you realize that life has been responding to you all along. Not to your wishes, but to your beliefs. Not to your words, but to your inner posture. When you stand in self-trust, life meets you with opportunity. When you stand in self-respect, life mirrors respect. When you stand in love, life rearranges itself to support love's expression. This is not philosophy, it is practice, and you are practicing it now. So remain here in this unfolding awareness. Let it inform your steps without turning them into a performance. You do not need to announce your transformation. Growth does not require an audience, it requires honesty. And honesty, when lived quietly and consistently, becomes its own reward. You are not trying to get somewhere else. You are learning how to be here fully, freely, and without apology. And in this being, something remarkable happens. Life stops feeling like a problem to be solved and begins to feel like a mystery to be lived. You participate rather than control. You trust rather than demand. You allow rather than resist. And in this allowing, you find that what you once called winning is simply the natural state of a soul that has remembered its place in the flow. And as you rest inside this flow, another truth gently reveals itself, not as a concept to grasp, but as a feeling you recognize in your bones. You begin to sense that freedom was never about escaping responsibility or circumstance. It was about releasing resistance to what is. The moment you stop arguing with reality, reality softens. Not because it changes instantly, but because you are no longer meeting it with tension. Acceptance is not surrender to limitation. It is alignment with intelligence. It is the doorway through which grace enters. You start to understand that much of your suffering was never caused by events themselves, but by the story you told yourself about those events, the meaning you assigned, the identity you wrapped around them. When you loosen your grip on those interpretations, life becomes lighter without losing its depth. You still care, you still feel, but you are no longer entangled. Compassion replaces control. Curiosity replaces judgment. And in that shift, your inner world becomes spacious enough to hold life as it is. There is a sacred paradox here. The less you try to manage life, the more skillfully you move through it. When you trust the unseen intelligence that has carried galaxies into form, you stop micromanaging your own becoming. You realize that you too are being shaped by forces that understand timing better than the mind ever could. Delays begin to feel purposeful. Detours feel instructive. Even endings carry a quiet sense of rightness because you trust that nothing essential is ever taken, only transformed. This trust awakens a deeper patience within you, not the patience of waiting, but the patience of presence. You stop leaning toward the future for fulfillment. You stop scanning the horizon for proof that you are on the right path. Instead, you bring your full attention to what is unfolding now, knowing that now is not a stepping stone, it is the destination. Life does not happen on the way to something else. It happens here, in the texture of this moment. And as your attention deepens, so does your appreciation. You notice beauty in places you once rushed past. Ordinary moments take on a quiet radiance. A conversation, a breath, a beam of light through a window, these are no longer background details. They are life itself expressing. Gratitude arises not as a practice, but as a natural response to awareness. When you are fully present, appreciation is inevitable. And appreciation is one of the highest forms of alignment. You may begin to feel a subtle sense of service emerging, not the heavy obligation to fix the world, but the gentle desire to contribute your presence. You realize that simply being grounded, kind, and authentic is a form of service. You don't need to change anyone. You don't need to convince or correct. Your state of being speaks more clearly than words ever could. When you are aligned, you become an invitation rather than an argument. This is where inner freedom becomes outer influence, not through force, but through coherence. People feel at ease around you without knowing why. Situations de-escalate in your presence. Possibilities open not because you demanded them, but because you are no longer blocking them with fear. Your life becomes less about outcomes and more about resonance, and resonance attracts what effort never could. You also begin to see how deeply interconnected everything is, how no thought is private, no intention isolated. The energy you carry shapes the space you enter. When you choose peace, you add peace to the field. When you choose love, you strengthen love's presence in the world. This is not metaphor, it is participation. You are not separate from the whole, you are an expression of it. And every moment offers you the chance to express consciously. There will be days when the old habits try to return, when the mind reaches for control or comparison. When that happens, you no longer criticize yourself. You simply notice. Awareness itself becomes the healer. You gently return to center, to breath, to presence. You remember that awakening is not linear, it is rhythmic, like tides. and each return to awareness strengthens your trust in yourself. Over time, you realize that nothing outside of you needs to be feared, because nothing outside of you defines you. Circumstances change, roles evolve, relationships shift, but the awareness witnessing all of it remains untouched. This awareness is your true home. When you identify with it, life becomes an exploration rather than a test. You engage fully, yet remain inwardly free. And so the journey continues, not toward a distant destination, but deeper into authenticity, deeper into truth, deeper into love. You are not arriving at freedom, you are uncovering it, layer by layer, belief by belief, breath by breath. And as you do, life responds not with drama, but with harmony, not with struggle, but with flow. Stay here, stay curious, stay kind with yourself. There is nothing you need to add to be whole, and nothing you need to remove to be worthy. You are learning to live from the inside out, guided not by fear of loss, but by trust in life's intelligence. And in that trust, you continue moving quietly, powerfully into a freedom that was never absent, only waiting to be recognized. And now, as this awareness settles more deeply into you, there is nothing left to seek, nothing left to prove, nothing left to hold together by effort. What remains is a quiet knowing, soft, steady, and unshakable. You feel it as a gentle certainty that you are held by life itself, not as a fragile visitor, but as an intimate expression of the same intelligence that turns seasons, lifts oceans, and lights the stars. You are not separate from that movement. You are it, momentarily given form. In this knowing, urgency dissolves. You no longer rush to arrive somewhere else, because you understand that presence is the only place life ever meets you. Each breath becomes sufficient. Each step becomes complete. You stop asking life to reassure you, because reassurance arises naturally when you trust your own alignment. There is a deep rest here, not the rest of sleep, but the rest of belonging, a sense that you have finally come home to yourself. You begin to move through the world with a lighter touch. You listen more than you speak. You feel more than you judge. You allow moments to unfold without rushing to label them. And in this openness, wisdom reveals itself not loudly, not dramatically, but with a quiet elegance that feels unmistakably true. You recognize it not because it is new, but because it feels familiar, like something you have always known and are only now remembering. Love takes on a new meaning here. It is no longer something you chase, negotiate, or withhold. It becomes the natural state from which you operate. Love as presence, love as allowance, love as the recognition of yourself in another. You realize that when you live from this place, your life becomes a blessing without effort. Your calm becomes contagious, your kindness becomes catalytic, and your authenticity becomes a mirror in which others glimpse their own truth. There is no longer a need to defend who you are. You stand gently in your being, rooted yet flexible, clear yet compassionate. You understand that strength does not come from resisting life, but from trusting it, from knowing when to act and when to let go, from honoring the rhythm that guides you without forcing it into form. You are no longer trying to control the river. You are learning how to float, how to steer with awareness, how to trust the current without surrendering your presence. And so winning reveals itself not as an event, but as a way of being. It is the quiet victory of self-acceptance, the enduring triumph of inner peace, the profound success of living in harmony with your own soul. You are not ahead, you are not behind. You are exactly where consciousness meets readiness, exactly where remembrance becomes embodiment. Let this understanding travel with you, not as something to cling to, but as something to return to. Again and again, whenever the world feels loud or confusing, you can come back to this center, to breath, to presence, to the knowing that you are enough, whole, and guided. Life does not require perfection from you. It requires participation. And you are participating now fully, consciously, lovingly. Remain open, remain gentle, remain awake. The journey does not end here, it deepens. And as it does, you will continue to discover that everything you were searching for has been quietly unfolding within you all along. You are not becoming aligned. You are remembering that you always were. And in that remembrance, life flows through you with ease, grace, and a quiet joy that needs no explanation.